Okay, so overall, I love the tone of his voice, the way he's singing. One thing that really struck me, and I think I noticed this before, but it just brought it home listening to this again, is the economy of the language. Just to give you an example, like Born in the USA, he says, son, the man of the factory says, son, if it was up to me, right? And we know exactly what he's talking about. And just if you contrast that with his earlier style, where he's like in the early 70s, where he's like, the Joker's on the corner and Jackie's spitting poetry with wild colors, on her hair. And, you know what I mean? It's like he totally changed his lyrical approach, and it really, really suited him. Gas fires in the refinery, and, so many just this stark American imagery that is works so powerfully and so well as symbols.
Yeah, the detail. Yeah. Yeah, I was actually thinking maybe I guess I agree with you. But I was going to hold off because I really don't know what to say about it. Versus what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Big Bruce fan. Yeah, I really couldn't, imagine what went down. Now, apparently, not apparently, but one of the albums from the Tracks 2 box set that came out a few months ago was the 1983, Garage Sessions. After Nebraska, and he's in the midst of, trying to figure that out and recording tons of stuff from, Born in the USA. Those sessions all bled into each other. He went out to LA, rented a house, set up some gear in a garage with a drum machine, and this time him playing, bass and occasional synth. And I think Mike Batten is
You're talking post Nebraska, like 1983 now?
Yeah. Anyway, that was one of the albums on the box set, which I haven't got yet because I just bloody can't afford it. But I got the single disc sampler from the box set, Lost and Found.
Yeah.
And it has 3 songs from those sessions. I'm not impressed with any of them. One of them is Elvis's Follow That Dream, which he did periodically throughout his entire career. I wasn't impressed. But I haven't heard the entire album from the box set. And apparently some of the songs were widely circulated on bootleg. I'm not that much of an Uber fan that I have heard everything, every bootleg, and famous or infamous. I guess what I'm getting to is I really wasn't expecting. I was expecting some cool historical artifacts in a Bruce academic sort of way, but maybe not stuff that would really, stand.
You mean in this Nebraska box set, your expectations were not super high because of what you had experienced with that box set?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, the album from the Tracks 2 box set, which is considered part of the Nebraska, Born in the USA, legacy, not legacy, but continuum. Long and short of it, I'm just astonished.
Yeah,
I don't know what I was expecting, and I haven't listened to the remastered original album yet. I listened to the Count Basie show, playing in Count Basie Theater, just empty.
And what did you think of that? What did you think of his voice in the present compared to when he recorded this originally?
They're two different voices.
Yeah.
And the guys, you got to give him extreme credit. Sure. I can't think of any of the old people other than, say, Jagger, who, never had that kind of, not range, but well, maybe range, but somebody whose voice is held up through the years of the decades. I can't think of anybody. And people utilize their weaknesses. Say Dylan, his supposed weaknesses as he's gotten older. And I guess I would agree with that. And wonderful. Springsteen's current day voice. It's in the studio. It's probably as strong as it's ever been. I haven't seen any show since 2007, the Magic Tour, I guess. It's the last time I saw him live. And so I thought it was really effective. The sound is fine. It doesn't have the kind of spooky, haunted feeling of the original, tape, the original session. It's just, he plays it pretty much note for note, from the album. Larry Campbell doing, very subdued, accompanying guitars, and occasionally Charlie Giordano playing a Celeste, the keyboard thing, widely used Motown, but the Bruce, used it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I enjoyed it just fine, but it was lacking a certain magic that the original sessions had.
The sound of the outtakes, where he attempted to just recreate the Nebraska tape in the studio with just himself. I think occasionally Danny Federici played a little keyboard line here and there, but it's wonderful sounding. Now, does it have? No, it's not anywhere near. It sounds almost contemporary. Sounds like.
Well, you're talking about the outtakes now?
I'm talking about the acoustic outtakes. Yeah.
When I was in the impression those were outtakes from the original sessions. Is that not true?
There's only two songs that I can identify, and that's the original "Born in the USA."
Yeah.
Which is from his bedroom setup.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read the book, Warren Zane's book, "Deliver Me from Nowhere."
No.
I'm sure we'll be seeing the movie, and I'll be seeing the movie eventually too. But I've known the details of it for decades. And the other one that I can identify just sonically, and I've heard about it, is "On the Prowl." So of those songs, I'm not sure. Look at my notes here and see how many there are. But
that's interesting, because I was in the impression, just sonic quality alone and this timbre of his voice, that these were all outtakes from the original sessions.
No, they were recorded a few months later. Most of them.
Oh, a few months later, but I mean, not recently.
No, there's no. There's no overdubbing, contemporary.
Okay, good.
Certainly vocals.
So it's in the general time frame within a few months.
From January '82, when the original tape was laid down, he, didn't do it all in one day. So for a few weeks, but then he went to the studio very soon afterward to try and recapture the mood of the album, and not just with those songs, but with a whole bunch of songs. I mean, the guy wrote enough material in those few months for like 3, possibly 4 albums.
Right.
3 albums with no filler, no.
Yeah, I thought every song on that 9-disc outtakes thing was just amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Some of them we know, Born in the USA, obviously, completely different, arrangement, feel, minor key. Sounds like John Fogerty. It sounds like a CCR thing. Losing Kind, when could have been on the album, and some of them were from the original tape a couple months earlier. But he's just trying to re-record them in a professional studio.
Like there's some that have some cool overdubs, like Child Bride has got like bells and harmonica. But I think his original setup in his bedroom in New Jersey or whatever was like a 4-track, like I used to use. So he could have done overdubs even on that if he wanted to, I would imagine.
Oh, he did on the original, on the album. He did. He played everything. Yeah, acoustic primarily, but electric on 2 songs.
Yeah.
And harmonica was probably done live, on a harmonica Dylanizer rack. But even maybe backing vocals. But so everything, he was a Tascam 4-track recorder, and he didn't know how to use it. And his guitar tech, who did the engineering, he didn't know how to use it either. He just said, Mike, go get me something I want to record. And so Mike Batland, who was his guitar tech at the time, went out and bought this thing, and they just were figuring it out as they went along. Anyway, as the story goes, and I don't think it's apocryphal, I think it's probably true from many, many sources. He just carried this tape. This one, they dubbed it down on a boombox. They didn't have anything to mix it with, so they mixed it on a boombox.
Carrying this, that was in the little documentary they released, like the 16-minute.
Yeah,
where he carried around in his shirt pocket.
Yeah. They mixed it with an Echoplex, an old, vintage Echoplex reverb unit, to get the slapback sound on not just the vocals and the guitar, but the entire recording, kind of like the Sun Records.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wrote down. It's like this slapback sound to me positions it clearly in the realm of like Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran and that late 50s rockabilly slapback vibe. Right.
So there's only really 2 songs that I can tell, and I haven't read, the notes and yet, but I've read the book, and I've been following it for a long time. I think the new stuff on the outtakes disc that were recorded in the studio, they lack that. There's some slapback on the vocals, but you can see what Bruce is going for. At the time, it's not just myth making or anything. You can tell the guy just wanted that sound.
Yeah, you mean the Electric Nebraska?
No, I'm talking about the original tape versus his attempts, just solo acoustic, a couple months later, to recreate at the record plant.
Oh, I see.
In the studio. They lacked that chaotic craziness, spooky sound that is on the album with all the slapback, reverb kind of on everything. And so the stuff he recorded later, more professional and proper sounding. They're still astonishing to me. I just
it's still amazing.
I don't know how he didn't. There was talk at the time of releasing Born in the USA and Nebraska as a double album. Well, he had enough material for Born in the USA for probably 3 albums.
Yeah, I hear these songs he didn't release from the Nebraska outtakes, and this is like Blind Willie McTell moment times 9. It's like one of those great Dylan songs that never got released. These are great Springsteen songs that, oh my God, how could these never get released?
And I think Bruce and Bob have, both, I think, properly been accused of not being very good editors of their own material.
Yeah, and there's also a case, and at least one song, of like it's variations of the same song. Like I think it's maybe Child Bride, and there's another song, Working on the Highway, I think, where like it's basically the same lyrics. It's a different version of the same song. So that's part of the issue, I imagine.
That right, and that's been going on for its entire career, up to probably the current day, reusing, transforming, or popping a line or a theme into a song. But certainly, you know, this is recorded so fast. I mean, between, you know, after the River Tour, which, you know, ended in 81,
Yeah.
you just considering, you know, the volume and, in retrospect, quality of the work from, you know, the Nebraska, the LA Garage songs, and ultimately the Born in the USA album, just the amount of material that surrounds all those sessions that were incorporated into this song, that song, the other song.
Yeah, just as a block of time, he was so prolific in those years after the River.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, he's been that way before. I mean, you look at the River sessions, it was the same deal. And even going back to, well, it really started with the Darkness on the Edge of Town, the post-Born to Run, where he was barred from recording legally by the court. And so, you know, they toured just nonstop all over the country in 76 and 77, and just played new material and just insane variations of old material. It just, so yeah, he was just, you know, he was a manic period for the dude. But just to get back to the Nebraska thing, yeah, it's just astounding. It's like, and this record feels like right now. It feels like right now in, you know, October, you know, going into November of 2025. And
I think
songs.
Yeah, I think part of why, I'm going to take a stab at why it does. I had this feeling like, you know, you got all these different characters, right? It's very cinematic, and you've got different names, but it's all very similar. And in my mind, it's kind of all one character. You know, it's a young guy, like Springsteen's age. He's a working class guy. He's trying to make it a system that's against him. You know, he's trying to get a girl. He's trying to hold down a job. Sometimes the system crushes him down and he's got to go, you know, a little bit outside the law. You know, I think that's part of the times we're in right now. It's like, you know, the prices of rent and groceries have just gotten so much higher than like the salaries that people are getting. You know, it just, there's something about that, the economic pressure of it that resonates with, in addition to all the other things that really resonates with this time.
Well, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, in 1982, you know, Reagan had been in office with his new, you know, economic visions of Reaganomics and the morning in America. And it was a scary time for people who knew what his agenda was or suspected what his agenda was.
Right.
Now, if Reagan were president now with those same policies in 2025, well, he'd be considered a far left radical by the GOP.
Right.
Maybe not far left, but he'd be considered left of being a centrist. If he were with his, you know, policies from 1980, well, and then his second term, it certainly, it has that timeless quality, but it's locked into the tradition, obviously, the American folk idiom, which, you know, encompasses, you know, everything from, you know, Delta blues, Chicago blues, you know, country, Bakersfield country, Nashville country, just the music that has no name, kind of like the Harry Smith, you know.
Yeah, that's part of what makes this so haunting and magical. It sounds like these recordings could have stepped right out of the Harry Smith compilation. You know, it's just that haunting and ancient in a way, yet topical at the same time.
Springsteen, to me, you know, hasn't really been known for as a great melodicist. Kind of like Dylan, I would say, kind of like Dylan. They're not, you know, Lennon, McCartney, or Jagger Richards, where they can have these super catchy, you know, hooks and vibes and melodies. Which is not to say, you know, Bob and Bruce aren't really, really good songwriters, but they're not really known for that in general. And so a lot of the melodies, just like Bob did, you know, starting in 62 or God knows when, from the Nebraska sessions and ultimately into the Born in the USA sessions. They're just the most basic progressions of sort of the American, popular or folk songbook up until that time. And so, but it's how they're played, how the guy sings, how he phrases, and the words, and just the precise language, which you can tell. It just, the guy spends a whole lot of time. For a guy who didn't graduate high school, the guy's the most literate. You talk about, Dylan's the Shakespeare of our generation. That's maybe. Springsteen he's an incredible wordsmith, and he cares about the exact proper language that he uses.
It's just something about the concision of it too in this particular era.
Yeah, he's kind of started that with the River, this stripped down, just very homely language, this very common idiomatic language, gone were the great imagery, certainly pre-Born to Run, where, it was like Dylan, the band, Robbie Robertson, the band, Levon Helm, the band, and Van Morrison, type of just, crazy, colorful imagery. And then, he started to strip that down with Born to Run. He said, well, I'm not just going to be a free-form, rock, hyperkinetic R&B band. We're going to be like a rock and roll band. And that's got its own story, Born to Run. But after that, with Darkness on the Edge of Town, he really started focusing. Mm-hmm. Well, I think he started getting more depressed. Mm-hmm. It's obviously, it's a big theme. It's part of the movie, which I haven't seen yet, and I'm in no rush to see. But I think the guy was literally, as Lou Reed put it, growing up in public.
Yeah, there's something really interesting about the class system, too, and just the way he talks. Like, he calls everyone in positions of authority, sir, bosses or state trooper. There's a certain way of talking that's very...
Yeah. What? Mr. is another one. Mr.
and Sir, that's right. And that's very powerful as a writing tool. It's like he's got the weight of authority, and he's kind of deferential to it. He knows he needs to step lightly in this powerful system that could, call it Sir and Mr. because it could crush him down. Yeah. Very, very, very well observed, and I'm sure you and I aren't the first people to observe that, but it's a very, very effective and powerful. Very conversational.
Tool. Yeah, that's another thing. The conversation. Jed, you're all over. You're in my head, man.
I was making notes like crazy. I was listening to this. It's like, I love how he's doing this. As a lyric writer myself, I'm just marveling at just how concise. That's what it's all about, right? Creating a powerful image and telling a story in the right amount of words. Yeah, but it's funny. Well, it's not funny. Well, we're going to have to get to Electric Nebraska, and you might as well. I really can't think of anything to say about any individual song because every single track astonished me, and I'm trying not to be use hyperbole or come off as a super uber fan or whatever. Every single track, and we haven't even got to Electric Nebraska, which I don't know what it would have been like if he'd actually decided to go with those sessions with the very stripped down, I noticed one surprise to me on the outtakes was Pink Cadillac and just how kind of melancholy and slowed down it was. It had a whole different vibe I wasn't expecting, and I kind of enjoyed.
Yeah. It's like, what's that about? It's the complete opposite vibe.
Exactly.
Big Daddy riding down the street, and, the sort of pimp imagery of the and that's not even a full band recording on the original, which is originally it was the B-side of the debut single, "Dancing in the Dark."
I know. I remember buying that and cranking it loud on my
Me too. And
Paris
it's got
stereo. Yeah.
completely different feel from the rest of the album.
Right. Yeah. It's so like rock and roll / rockabilly in a great
right.
way.
Everything. Max's drum sound is just bass. Max on drums, Gary on talent, just Bruce on guitar, and Clarence pumping the tenor sax.
Yeah, there's no
really
there's no
live.
synth, that signature synth sound from Born in the USA. I don't think that was on.
There's no
Pink
keyboards
Cadillac.
at all.
Yeah,
No,
that's part of why I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. Roy and Danny aren't even on that, but it got such a great, sort of, retro vibe. It really stands out from the rest of the Born in the USA sessions. There's some songs that have been released subsequently that kind of, have that vibe, but not that sound, like Max's, drum sound, But this new version, or not new, but this acoustic version is the complete. It's like the singer, he's not in the same place. He's in the opposite place. He's lonesome. He's horny, but he's lonesome.
Right. He's not necessarily excited about the Pink Cadillac in the same way.
Not in the same way. Not in the same way. Yeah.
Speaking of, this might be a good transition. In the Electric Nebraska album, part of this box set, I really liked Born in the USA version so much so I was like, I think I like this better than the actual version. I went back and listened, and there's just something like in this version, it's kind of like you got these driving, like droney guitars going through it.
One guitar, one bass, and one drum. Not even Steve on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I went back and I do like it better than the final version on Born in the USA. It's just got this rock and edge to it that is a whole different vibe.
Yeah, that's the same arrangement as the acoustic version, from the January tape, which has an overdubbed, very subtle but very powerful electric guitar, toward the middle and the end of the song on the original. So this is the same arrangement, the same melody. It's a minor key thing. I thought when I first heard it, and I only listened to it once on YouTube when they released it a few weeks ago, it sounded like CCR, John Fogerty. Mm-hmm. And I have read on some Bruce, social media platforms and whatnot, a lot of people saying that they prefer it to the original. And I wonder if that's a case of just having heard the original so much, or being so, I hate to use the word iconic, because it's ubiquitous these days. Everything and everybody is iconic these days, on the internet anyway. But that it's a fresh take, and there's no ambiguity about the lyric and what it means, and what the singers.
Yeah. You're more apt to misunderstand it as a rah rah USA chant in the way it was finally released.
Yeah. Right. So it has that going for it. I would say, and I am going to say that the original released version, it's one of the great miracles of popular music in the 20th century.
The electric version.
You can't touch it.
The electric version.
The electric version. The album, the top 40 single. What an unlikely top 40 single too. You can't touch it.
No, which one can't you touch? The one on the Electric Nebraska disc 2, or the actual release single?
No, I'm talking about the release single on the Born in the USA album.
Okay.
yeah, there's nothing like it in popular music. And
Well, okay. I like the Electric Nebraska version better myself, but
oh, I like it a whole lot too. They're completely different songs. Their tone, their emotional and psychological feel is different. Instrumentally, everything about them they might as well be different songs.
yeah, I agree.
But if you have to pick one of those, three, studio recordings, all recorded within like 2 or 3 months of each other. And you got to remember that the take, the famous take, the album single take of Born in the USA was only the second take that they did with the band. With no overdubs. In fact, it ran quite a bit longer, and I've heard a crummy sounding bootleg, and it's just instrumental, but it's as crazed as intense. And I hopefully Bruce will be eventually release that unedited version.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Tracks 3. But yeah, to me, that you can't touch it. It's just everything that everybody hates about it or claims to hate about it, I love about it. From Roy's synth line, well, it's Roy and Danny on synthesizers. It's just a compelling piece of music. Whether you can dance to it or you can't dance to it, whether you think it's a jingoistic, rah rah, it doesn't matter how you interpret what the song is about. It's the emotional push that the song has for me. I'm sure there were plenty of people, when Bruce was touring the album in '84 and '85 in various European countries or Asian continents that couldn't understand the words and didn't understand, but they understood musically the force. It's one of the most forceful rock and roll.
Yeah, I find the keyboard sound a little bit too 80s and dated sounding for my liking, but I think part of what makes the version that was released so powerful is, in addition to the band being incredible, is Bruce's vocal is just incredible. Right.
Jed, I'm going to disagree with you about the keyboard sound.
I know you like it. I'm saying that's, we just agree to differ there.
Right. Yeah, right. But I'm going to try and qualify this a bit. On the rest of the album and a lot of the outtakes from the full band sessions, Roy had just, got, a Yamaha synthesizer.
New toy, sure.
A lot of them I don't really dig. And even Danny Federici had upgraded. He wasn't just using a Hammond B3 organ. He was, using synths as well. And there's a lot of really, really great material from those sessions that I think, and including on the album, which, was one of the biggest selling albums of all time. The melodies, I think, are great because, Roy is, such a, great melodicist. But I don't dig the tones and the sounds. They sound dated to me. Well, I can go through the track list, every song pretty much on the album, except probably Darlington County and Work on the Highway, whatever, that don't, have a synth or an overly bubbly, organ keyboard pad. I think Born in the USA, it does not sound dated. It does not sound like 80s to me. There's in Dave Marsh's second book on Springsteen called Glory Days, Bruce Springsteen in the 80s, that decades ago. And he felt that the synth line, the key signature line from Born in the USA had the intervals had an Asian quality. I thought, well, and I really, hadn't listened to a lot of, Asian music, whatever that means, or pre-K-pop. And I've heard some things, say on KBM, on like the weekend shows in recent years, where it's like, and
I can kind of hear that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I thought, maybe that influenced my thinking, but to me, to my ears, without any sort of dogma behind it, or influenced by it from Dave Marsh, that line, ding, 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 that does not sound, and even the tone of the synths, and even Bob Clearmountain's big wide open mix doesn't particularly sound 80s to me. It sounds heraldic, something Mike Scott might have done with the Waterboys in his 85 sessions. Well,
sure, no, I can hear that, and I totally can hear that, the heraldic aspect, now that you mention it. I don't want us to get distracted too far afield from the Nebraska.
Okay, sure. But this new version of, not new, but stripped down version of Born in the USA, I feel is a completely different song, but it's got a different energy to it, different anger to it, a different passion, a different vulnerability to it, how the singer sings it, how the band plays it, without the various embellishments of the big version.
You can tell too, some of these tracks were like the band was clearly hearing it for the first time because they were just a little bit behind the beat, and then they never recorded it again. So it's more just like an interesting artifact. But in all cases, I'm really glad they included these.
Yeah, apparently he did on the 84-85 Born in the USA tour. I think I've heard, not heard, but I've read that he performed almost every song, or 8 of the 10 songs. I forget which 2 he didn't ever do live, but certainly on the big box set, 1975 to 85.
Oh yeah, I would have loved to hear those, especially Atlantic City. To me, that really rocked with Little Steven. I assume that's Little Steven doing the backup.
Yeah, that's Steve, and 12-string acoustic.
And I had to look up what a Chicken Man was. You know that story?
He's the guy who wouldn't sell, apparently.
Well, Chicken Man was a mob boss who at a certain time owned like a poultry farm. That's what he's talking about, a certain mob boss that was well known.
Oh, I didn't know that. I heard decades ago that it was just a metaphor. It was like a term, maybe East Coast, for somebody who wouldn't sell their property. So the government was moving in with eminent domain and saying, we're taking your property, take it or leave it. Here's what we're offering. And a chicken man was somebody who wouldn't sell. And so that's what I had heard. But that was not really based on anything. It was just, decades before the internet. So, yeah, I don't know. That's certainly the arrangement, that he started using with the band. And I don't know, because I'm not an Uber fan, I haven't heard every bloody bootleg, that they played Atlantic City with that full band arrangement. It became a very powerful arrangement.
It is powerful. It just rocks. It goes right in the pocket.
Yeah, but he's been doing that for decades now, up until the current time, that arrangement. I actually, with the full band, with, Roy's piano and Danny or Charlie Giordano's organ, those are almost too bright. Ding, 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 which are basically aping from the original tape. Bruce overdubbed a mandolin. Well, these days and these decades, Steve plays mandolin on several songs, but on that. But it's the keyboards that are mimicking that, and they're just too bright and too not kaleidoscopic, but sort of carnival-like for such a bummer of a song, even though it had. But that's clearly the original template for it, and that's just there's no keys on that. Again, that's just Max, Gary, and Steve on that, offering backing vocals. Yeah, that's more of an artifact thing. You know, if you've heard Bruce, you know, on bootlegs or even official releases through the decades, you know, live releases, you know that's how the band plays it. But on from the '84 tour, and I saw the very second or third show of the tour, which he started in St. Paul, the old St. Paul Civic Center. You did 3 shows, and I forget which one. De Palma directed the video for Dancing in the Dark, and that wasn't the show I was at because they had to stop the song like 3 or 4 times to get, you know, the cameras and the levels right and all that stuff. And they actually played the song like, you know, almost 3 or 4 times entirely. But that was, you know, from the first 3 shows of the big, you know, Born in the USA, you know, juggernaut. Right. But he was playing Nebraska because that was, you know, another almost brand new album. He played several songs, and he released some of them, the title track, Johnny 99, Reason to Believe, on the big, you know, live box set from 1986. But you can hear on the Electric Nebraska version of the title track, that's the template they use. But it's very interesting what you noted, that the band sounds almost unsure, a little behind the beat. It's not, you know, the big sound and the big Bob Claremont mix of the live thing, you know, document. Yeah. And that tenderness of the band is sort of.
Yeah, I forget which song it was. Atlantic City didn't sound like that to me, but there were a few that were like.
The title track is one. Let me see. I think it matched on the hill. Nebraska. I think Match on the Hill is very, very slight, understated band accompaniment.
Go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead. I was just going to get into the ride because everything explodes after that.
Well, just you know, I was saying like the narrator is kind of this certain guy in his 20s, and the other narrator point of view that I really enjoy is he's still telling it from that same age guy, but he'll tell it looking back at his childhood, you know, like a Mansion on the Hill. Okay. Used cars.
Used cars, yeah.
And that's very effective too. It's like, it's embedded in like the class system, and like his dad, you know, they're kind of yearning for like that life on the mansion on the hill, or, you know, or a certain car, and just the type of story he's trying to tell you when he's going back to his childhood, you know?
Yeah, my dad actually used to like to do that too. Drive nice fancy houses, and I grew up in a really fancy house.
I remember you told me that.
Yeah, but he liked to do that. He liked to slow down, and, you know, and look and talk about it, and talk about, you know, how much it was supposedly worth, and that thing. And, you know, we were solidly middle class. You know, we weren't, you know, poor people like the Springsteens. But yeah, it's not just those 2 songs, Used Cars and Mansion on the Hill. You know, My Father's House. Then, you know, Downbound Train. You know, various iterations. You know, the dream he's having. You know, that's primarily about, you know, a woman, but it's the sense of memory. Something that Bruce said years ago. Maybe it's in his book, his song book called Songs. But I think he said it before that. He said, maybe at the time the album was released, he said, this album and the sound of it is what my childhood sounded like. And
Yeah.
that to me is really powerful.
Yeah, it does
Really
feel like
powerful.
that. I can hear that.
Yeah, and there's bits of joy. It's not all just misery, Open All Night. And,
I know. I thought that on the full album, he finishes with "Reason to Believe," which is kind of humorous. I think that's the one where like the guy is like poking a dog with a stick.
Yeah.
It's got a lighthearted, like humorous aspect to it. So that was, a nice way, I think, to leave the listener on the original album.
Well, yeah, and it's got that kind of jaunty, mid-tempo rockabilly rhythm.
And actually, if you don't mind, I thought, we're talking about the concision of his lyrics and the powerful imagery. I thought the end of Open All Night, but anyway, can I just quote a couple lines from the end of that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, 5 a.m., oil pressure is sinking fast. I make a pit stop, wipe the windshield, check the gas. Gotta
That's
call
Chuck
my
Berry.
yeah,
Chuck Berry,
right. That's Chuck. Totally.
Right.
Gotta call my baby on the telephone. Let her know that her daddy's coming on home. Sit tight, little mama. I'm a coming round. I got 3 more hours, but I'm on covered ground. Your eyes get itchy in the wee hours. Here's the one that totally gets me. Sun's just a red ball rising over them refinery towers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Radio's jammed up with gospel stations. Lost souls calling, long distance salvation. Hey, Mr. DJ, won't you hear my last prayer? Hey ho, rock and roll, deliver me from nowhere. There's a lot of like New Jersey Turnpike thing, and that mood reminded me a lot of Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers, Roadrunner. The Turnpike, the late nights, doing stuff maybe you shouldn't be doing. It's empty, it's quiet. You're finding a sense of peace, but you're speeding along a hairpin turn, and it's danger mixed with desolation. There was something that I picked up a similarity there.
Desolation would be the stronger rather than a peacefulness, including in Jonathan Richman's song.
Yeah.
Even though he has that childlike voice, which is wonderful. The guy's lonely as hell. He's lonely. He's horny. He's everything. He's afraid. He's hopeful. Everything, and he's pushing his car. It's a great driving song, That's very astute, and of course, there will be the other, song with the great "Deliver Me from Nowhere" line, which is "State Trooper," which I read this in Dave Marsh's second book, Glory Days, but I never actually heard the Suicide album from 76, 77. And when I was just getting into the so-called punk rock new wave thing with my paper out money and buying the Clash's the import version of their first album, I'd never heard Frankie Teardrop. And I don't know if you know the story of that.
I know the song. I'm not sure I know the story.
I only heard the song just a few months ago. I just YouTubed that. I'd heard about it all these decades.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard it. And it actually gave me the creeps.
Yeah.
And I thought it was immune to that, I'm a musician, I can understand these things. I can understand art and I'm listening with a musician's ear and a craftsman's ear. It actually gave me the creeps. And apparently that was what Bruce is going for. And he had met Alan Vega at the record plant, apparently, during this time period. The River Sessions. Or maybe it was before the River Sessions. Then they got talking and whatnot. And Alan Vega even talked about it, Alan Vega, before his death just a couple of years ago, how he the first time he heard Nebraska, when he got to the song State Trooper, he thought, is that me? Is that something I did? Somebody, the engineer recorded?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Oh, that's Bruce. Which is, it's essentially, it's, 2 notes, the entire song.
Yeah, but that is very interesting because, suicide is like there's something very European about it, and there's something very American about Nebraska. So
right,
to bridge those things together is very interesting.
Yeah. Well, the suicide guys, Alan Vega, and who's the other guy?
I forget.
Yeah, but they were New York City boys, so they were part of that whole milieu, Blondie, Talking Heads, Heartbreakers, Boydoids, television. They're part of that whole milieu at the time, and I think they only released maybe 2 albums, but at the time I just never. They were just a blind spot for me for 20, 30, 40 years. I just had no interest. I kind of thought maybe, it's 2 guys, a singer and a guy with a drum machine. And like, Kraftwerk, artsier version of Kraftwerk. And Kraftwerk had some great stuff. But sure. I just was never inspired to look it up or whatever. But then I read about these references with Bruce being heavily influenced by that album, and particularly that song. Mm-hmm. But even still, it took me many, many years to look it up on the internet. I
can hear that. Like there's a certain darkness in there, and like you said, the alternating syllables. Yeah.
Yeah, but the shrieks too. The shrieks at the end of that line, "Deliver me from nowhere," both from probably the most up song on the album, "Open All Night." Hey, Mr. DJ, won't you hear my last prayer? Hey, rock and roll, deliver me from nowhere. To the very final lines of State Trooper. Also deliver me from nowhere. That's a very, very powerful image. Deliver me from nowhere. Think about that in the universal context. That's Shakespearean, Mr. Zimmerman.
Deliver me from nowhere. Actually, I had made a note. I thought the album ended on a hopeful note, with all these characters, all these terrible stories. The final line we're left with is, still at the end of every hard-earned day, people still find some reason to believe.
Well, it's complete mockery. It's complete irony. That's probably the first time Bruce really, well, not the first time, but it's complete irony. It's the joke. The joke is there is no reason to believe. I just elucidated and pointed out 3 examples.
But still, at the end of every hard-earned day, people will find some reason to believe.
They think they will. They think they do. Exactly. They think they do. They think they have a reason to believe. It's even darker than the whole rest of the album combined. That's right. And they keep going on. The world keeps turning. The sun keeps rising. And they have that reason to believe. And that's the joke, the dark joke.
See, I don't see it like that. I see it like that's just a lot of the humanity in these things. It's like, all these terrible things keep happening, but they just keep going.
That's right. And they keep happening, and they keep going. And
I don't find that to be a tragedy.
It's not. It doesn't have to be tragedy if you don't want to look at it that way. If you want to, speak in Nietzschean terms about the nature of life, or the French existentialist Camus or whatever, it can be tragedy or not tragedy. It can all be absurd. Speaking of the French existentialists, sure. Where was Bruce coming from when he wrote it? How well read he was at the time? He's probably 30, 31 at the time he wrote it. I don't know.
I don't care, like whatever he read or didn't read. I'm just reading it like how I'm reading it.
I read it as a slightly queasy joke.
See, I didn't read it like that. I wrote it like, all right, this is just how it is. People have all these terrible things and they just keep going.
Well, it's both. It's both.
Sure.
It's both.
I get it. Yeah.
The sound, this swampy, low down, 1-4-5 progression isn't offering anything new. It's not,
No, but the way he sings at the end of every hard and day, people find some reason. He's not singing it in a dour way. He's singing it in an upbeat kind of way.
Oh, of course. The exaltation of despair. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like singing the blues, right? It's like,
of course,
we're going to talk about the blues, but we're going to celebrate also while we're doing it.
Well, it's a pretty universal. Yeah, he uses local colloquial images. The dead dog on the highway, the old man in the whitewashed shotgun shack passing away.
Oh, yeah.
The groom waiting at the riverside for his wedding, and the bride doesn't show up. The young girl who loves her husband so much, and he just takes off, and she waits at the end of the dirt road. So he uses these images, which show you the commonplace, not just in the United States, but all over the world.
Well, particularly New Jersey, he's got like Linden Town and Match on the Hill. He's got Mawa in Johnny 99. He's got Atlantic City. So I read a lot of this as kind of like, a very localized, I don't want to say love letter because it's pretty dark, but a lot of it is set in the place that he knows. Occasionally he'll take us to like Michigan or, some nondescript place, but there's a lot of very specific New Jersey references in this album, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, very much so. That's always struck me. It's almost as localized as, say, the New York Dolls. They're local references for New York City and the boroughs. And I often wondered through the years. I knew about Mawa as a real place in New Jersey, city.
I had my Google Maps out. I was like looking. I'm like, is that really New Jersey? And sure enough, there it is, or Linden or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Very street names and whatnot. And I thought, no, it'd be perfectly all right to have poetic license, just make up.
Yeah.
Towns or cities or streets, but apparently a lot of them are very very real.
Yeah.
So it's strange. It's like it's a classic American folk blues country, Harry Smith, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Document, but set in the modern age. Modern meaning, well, certainly post World War II, but
right.
And so these songs are they're universal enough in their themes and what they're expressing, but they're very local locations.
And there's something about, I just feel like he's just living in this wasteland. He's just documenting this post-World War II hellscape. And he's got like the soul of a poet, and he's going to lay it down what he's going through.
Yeah, well, apparently, if you know anything about that, and apparently this is what the movie is about.
Mm-hmm. He had
a complete monopolar depressive.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not bipolar. And for all his energy and stamina, say, in performance. No, he's clearly he's not bipolar. He's not.
Monopolar means you just stay depressed. You don't go up to the ecstatic.
Yeah, monopolar. Yeah, sure. You're just a miserable hurt. You're Kurt Vonnegut,
Mm-hmm.
So he gets off the river tour. 2 years, almost 2 years of touring. They've gone overseas. They've played Europe. Their eyes are really open. He's had his first, minor, single in Hungry Heart, from the River album.
I love that song.
And so the guy gets home, and what? The guy's
miserable. He's miserable. He, screws up his leg, gets his leg injured again in an ATV accident. He gets laid up in bed, can't work, can't play with, walk around. He's just a miserable person. And at some point, he rents a house in Colts Neck, New Jersey. That's the name, Colts Neck. So the guy doesn't even have a house. And supposedly, according to many, guys in the E Street Band, Gary Talent, Max Weinberg have both said, even Steve Van Sant said, the River tour is the first time they really made any money, where they somewhat felt comfortable. Steve Van Sant was doing construction after the 78 Darkest on the Edge of Town tour, which is considered one of the greatest tours, rock and roll tours ever in history.
Yeah.
And he's working construction, when he wasn't working, writing and producing for the Asbury Jukes or the E Street Band, whatever.
Yeah.
Apparently they didn't have any money, and their whole contractual thing, they screwed up and whatever. That's one of the reasons they played live so much is to make some money, because they weren't allowed to record. 77 or 76 to 78 did the lawsuit against Bruce's former manager, Mike Appel. Wow. Anyway, so at the end of the River tour, so the guy's miserable for whatever reason, because, as Kurt Vonnegut would say, bad chemicals. Bad chemicals meaning he's bloody depressed. And he's not going out, he's not seeing anybody, he's not hanging out with anybody. He's just writing, and wants to do some demos, so he doesn't have to, record on a boombox, but he doesn't want to, or doesn't have the money, or doesn't think it's worthwhile to rent studio time to actually work on songs. So he gets his guitar tech to go out and buy this Tascam 4-track.
Yeah.
The rest is history, that's,
And the other thing, I don't know if we really discussed it, like as a specific thing, is just the quality of his voice and his singing. It's so good. It's so emotive. It's like just the right amount of vibrato. He was trying to evoke feeling from his childhood. I think that's part of the reason they released these versions. Like, he really went to that place, was channeling something. And I just love this era Bruce, just the quality of his voice and how he can tell a story.
Yeah, he hadn't quite given up on the imagistic. Is the very last, say, the River album, the last of the heavy, romantic, dramatic sort of imagery. But he hadn't fully embraced the sort of plain-spoken folk blues idiom that would, be his main feature, after Nebraska and Born in the USA. And apparently it was, he's carrying this tape around with him for months.
Yeah, it had that falsetto. Like you said, it had the yelps and the screams. It was just so emotive, but low-key, where it needed to be, too.
Yeah, he said, and Steve Van Sant said as well, he said, dude, for one thing, that tape isn't even in a case.
Yeah.
That tape, that, and after trying the solo sessions and then the Born in the USA sessions, which, Steve Van Sant was, co-producer for those sessions as well, said, all right, you don't like it? You don't like the band version? You don't like your attempts in the studio solo? Just release the tape.
Yeah.
And
because Bruce is notorious that way, just doing things over and over again, right?
Yeah, and I guess that was the tipping point. But Bruce is in a state, and it must be rough. And he isn't a millionaire or anything. He's not even 100,000 era at that point. After the River, but he's doing well enough. Why he can't buy a house or have his own apartment? Why he's still renting little ranch houses in Colts Neck, New Jersey. That's a lot of the reason he's in a few years he's going to go into therapy.
I wonder where. It's funny to imagine, like, where's all his stuff? It must be at his parents' garage or something.
His stuff from when? From
like just his whole life up to that point.
Well, his parents moved out to L.A. in like 1969.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't have any stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, and he went out there with a band with Steel Mill, I think. Played a couple shows, and this is all laid out in his very well in his autobiography, Born to Run, which is really one of the best. Which I've
read. Yeah, and now that you mentioned, I do remember his parents moving out there. Yeah. Yeah,
and at some point, did they move back to Jersey? I don't know. I just wasn't keeping track. But, where's all this stuff? Well, his family's totally dysfunctional, as he laid out. I knew that stuff from 1978, which is only the first time, record of his. I only liked one song of his before that, Born to Run, not even the album. And for some reason, I heard some things, a couple songs from Darkness at the Edge of Town when that was released in '78. I had paper route money. I bought the album and said, "Holy cow!" I even bought a very early bootleg from that tour, and of course, that was the tour in November of 1978. I saw my very first concert, which was Bruce and the E Street Band. So it happened actually really quick for me, even though my brother Sean had all his albums previous to Dark Side of the Edge of Town in 1978. I really only liked one song, which was Born to Run. Mm-hmm. So just something clicked in me as a 15-year-old. Bought the record because I could, because I had money, and was buying other records. And said, "Holy cow! I don't know what he's talking about. I don't understand. I don't understand his language, his references. I have zero experience with girls or women. This really, just the sound of the record is just extremely powerful." So that got me into Bruce at that time.
Yeah, that just reminds me, like, my entry point to Bruce. I remember I had a friend who was into the Clash, and we had bonded about a lot of similar music. And this is when Springsteen was doing those Born in the USA shows here in Minneapolis. And he told me he was going to those shows. And I thought, man, what are you going to see Springsteen for? What's up with that?
That was St. Paul, dude. I was at one of those shows.
Right.
They were the first shows of the tour worldwide.
I know.
He said Minneapolis. All right, hey, we're going to get parochial here. It was St. Paul, not Minneapolis, folks.
Okay, I stand corrected. But anyway, I had no interest in Springsteen. I thought I was just not. He wasn't on my radar as something that was interesting. And my friend who's in the Clash was like, "No, Springsteen's cool, man. You gotta listen to The River." I was like, "All right." And I went and I bought the River album on vinyl, and I was like, "This is amazing." And I got really into The River, and then I went back at Darkness at the Edge of Town. Oh, this is great. And Born to Run, great. I got really into the Born in the USA album, especially the more rockin' songs like Darlington County or whatever. And so anyway, that was my entry point to Bruce right there.
Yeah. Probably for a whole lot of people too.
Yeah.
Well, basically me too, except that, as I said, my brother Sean, was into him from, his first album in '73, and so had all of that. But I didn't listen to it. Yeah, I just, I heard Born to Run on the radio a few times.
Sure. Yeah, I was familiar with that, yeah.
But I remember listening to the album going, what's this?
Mm-hmm.
This is Broadway? This is like, what's going on here?
Right.
It didn't rock. Well, of course I was wrong, but I was also like 13 or 14, or 12 or 13, I should say. Yeah. It's funny. The thing about the river, yeah, that's probably it's my favorite sounding album of his.
I remember on the school bus going to school. This was around the time of boom boxes and Walkman and stuff. And I remember there was a guy in the bus who was cranking the river. So I take that back because he was playing like Hungry Heart, blasting it on his boombox. And I remember loving that song. I just thought, oh, this just sounds so great on the boombox. Played with a cassette on a boombox.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, that was, Steve Van Zant's first, co-production job as a river.
Oh, really?
And Bruce said Steve likes things that sound a bit trashy. Now, Steve he'd already produced 3 albums for very different sounding albums. For Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes.
Yeah.
But the thing with the river, they recorded mostly live, very few overdubs in the studio in the power station. It's an old converted church, and the main room, recording room, is a big cavernous room. So,
that's interesting because John Lennon did some recording there in his final year.
Yeah, one of his big. Yeah, did he do Double Fantasy there?
Yeah, part of it.
Which, of course, doesn't sound anything like the river.
No,
but because Steve wanted to utilize the full room, all the instruments bleeding into each other. He's going for Exile on Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe London Calling, which isn't as roomy sounding, but it's certainly as eclectic.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of funny. All 3 of those, iconic. God, I hate that word. I'm so sick of it. Double albums. They feature black and white improvised artwork. Mm-hmm. Exile, London Calling, and the River I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And they're all wildly disparate and varied in their sounds and styles.
Sure.
Of course, Exile was poorly received when it was released. London Calling, it was like a whole new band, for the Clash.
And the Beatles' White Album, which is, all kinds of different styles, that was black and white also.
Right. Good call. Right. And at a very desperate time for the Beatles, just like the Stones, mm-hmm. Had to move out of, England for the tax reasons. They became exiles in France. Was it a desperate time for Bruce? Bruce is probably always desperate mm-hmm. With the river. But the White Album, good call there. As far as the great double albums with black and white photography and imagery.
Would you say Nebraska is your favorite Springsteen album?
No. I know a lot of people, different tastes. People who don't go for the E Street Band mythology and, Clarence the sax and the big heavy keyboard.
I really like the River personally.
Probably the River and Nebraska might be tied for first. Born for Run also, even though I think it's very flawed sonically, just as a piece of work. So those 3 probably at the beginning. Some very later work, sonically, the Magic album from 2007.
Mm-hmm. That had some good songs.
Extremely loud and overdriven mastering, brick wall, but had a very live sound, very similar to the River sessions.
Yeah, that's right. That was a big deal at the time.
And it was kind of fitting because, the record was kind of reflecting the Iraq War. And he's so very discordant and distorted. Yeah. Kind of fitting, but that had some.
But there was something kind of hopeful in it. And it's interesting, thinking about Nebraska and how like certain seeds in Nebraska, like early versions of Born in the USA, it's almost like you have to think of Nebraska and Born in the USA as like two different phases of one overarching thing in some ways.
Yeah, that's true, but they bled into each other.
Right.
And even backtrack. Say the 83 garage sessions where he said,
yeah, that kind of sits in the middle there. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm going to go out to L.A. I can't. I've been working with the band, recording all of this material, this tons of material, including Nebraska material, attempting it, and now I've got to go west and be on my own and record these solo things in a garage. So that's another chapter. And as I've said, I haven't heard the album that was just released on the Tracks 2 box set, but it just and some songs were released from that. Johnny 99 was the B-side of I'm on Fire. And either that's the full band version, certainly sounds like a live drum, but on the Tracks Volume 1 box set from 1998, they released an alternate version, which I think is the same vocal, that's clearly a drum machine and has some different arrangements.
Yeah, Johnny 99, I just I had made a note about that there's a sense of like a just world in this universe. Johnny 99, he goes to prison for his crime. And just like in the song, the guy in the Nebraska song, it's like people do bad things, but they pay a price for it.
Right. Oh, I just want to say, Jed, I meant Bye Bye Johnny, not Johnny 99.
Okay. Bye Bye Johnny. Okay.
One. Man on the radio says Elvis Presley's died. It's like a minute and 15 seconds long. So
okay,
very
gotcha. Yep.
That was the B-side of the original I'm on Fire single.
Okay.
From the garage sessions. I'm not forgetting what you just said about Johnny 99, because I got something to say to that. But another song from the garage sessions, which apparently the original version is on the big Tracks Volume 2 box set, which I can't afford, but was released as the B-side to the Born in the USA single from 1984. I think it's one of his probably top 15, top 10 songs for me. It's called Shout Out the Light.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a soldier song.
Yeah.
So it's like flip side, but it's just acoustic guitar. And Susie Tyrell, it'll be like another 10, 15 years before she's actually in the E Street Band. She's working with Buster Poindexter at the time in New York City. Does just a haunting Appalachian fiddle overdub.
Oh, okay.
Shut Out the Lights. It sounds like something directly.
No, I vaguely remember that because I bought all those singles. I remember really liking that.
It's the runways. It's really, really desolate.
Is that the one that starts off the runway, Rushed Out by Adam?
As he felt the wheel shut down.
Yeah, I love that song.
Yeah. And just the detail on that, right? The guys, coming home from the war.
Yeah, that was a great song.
Yeah, it's very, very much. So that, you have to consider that whole, 83, garage thing in the continuum of, well, I'd say from the river to Nebraska to Born in the USA. But
I remember at the time, it was the B-sides on those Born in the USA singles that really intrigued me at the time. I was like, whoa, where's this coming from? These are my favorite songs from that era.
Yeah, Glory Days had Stand On It, which is just a straight Jerry Lee Lewis rockabilly thing. Just bass guitar, one guitar, drums, and Roy on the grooviest boogie woogie piano he's probably ever played on record. That was the B-side. It's kind of a slight throwaway song. To get back to what you're saying about Johnny 99, this is something that Dave Marsh pointed out in his book. I guess it would be Glory Days, which in the 80s, because his first book, which I read when it came out, a little paperback version called Born to Run, ended with River Sessions. So it must have been from his second book, but he pointed out, I think, a lot of people don't like Dave Marsh. Think he's too close to Bruce, he's a friend, and he's also a professional, he used to be a big time, music critic, and very opinionated guy. He said about Nebraska, there's like half the songs on the record, there's characters who are almost begging to be killed, begging to die.
Yeah.
And Johnny 99,
Right.
If, I got debts no honest man can pay, bankers hold my mortgage, they're trying to take my house away. Sit back in that chair, think it over, Judge, one more time. Yeah, if you can kill a man for the thoughts running in his head, sit back in that chair, Judge, think it over one more time. Let him shave off my head and put me on that execution line.
Yeah, it's like, I think in Nebraska, they're like, why did you do what you did? And he's like, well, I don't know. I guess there's just a meanness in this world. It's like,
right.
They just expect justice to come to them.
Well, even The Reason to Believe, which is the most lighthearted song, we've already talked about that on the record. Basically, people are accepting, Atlantic City, and some of them just outright on Johnny 99. He asked the judge, I don't want life in prison.
Yeah.
Give me the death sentence.
Yeah. Right.
So that's what frame of mind Bruce is in, what the country was, the United States was, experiencing economically, socially in 1982. Asked Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five what they were doing in 1982. Asked the Clash what they were doing when they were touring the United States in 1982 and what they were writing about as outsiders, as Englishmen. Yeah, so that was a great year for music. We've already done an episode on the glorious year of 1982, but it was a great year for music. But a lot of that music was pretty incisive and detailed.
Yeah.
X's under the big black sun, for example.
And the other thing that's kind of interesting about this era of Bruce, and you would know this better than me, but my impression is never before or after had he channeled so many characters.
Well,
would you say?
Yeah, that was probably the start. I know what you're talking about.
It's in every song. It's like it's either about this guy, like you were just talking about, who killed these people, or he's telling it from this character's point of view. He's just having a short stories, and he's having fun. Fun is probably the wrong word because of the mindset he's in, but he's exploring this idea of just channeling these various characters as songwriting vehicles.
Right, but he's always been about characters. Think his very first album.
Oh, absolutely.
Mad Drummers, Bummers, Indians in the Summer, the Teenage Different, and then the next album, Wild the Innocent, and the East Beat Shuffle. But these are,
those first two albums for sure. But by like Born to Run, it's feeling a little bit more like universal. Well, and like these are just like micro character studies by the time we're like in Nebraska. There's just something unique about it.
Micro characters. That's the astute, Jed. Yeah. Here's how I think Dave Marsh put it in his first book, is that from the get-go, from Bruce's first album, Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey, to the second album, they're congregated with these crazy characters, loads of people. And they all
he's just throwing hundreds of characters into those songs.
Right. In the second album, but by the time of the third album, the characters are getting fewer. It's just it's mainly a guy and his girl.
Yeah.
And they're trying to, there's some estimations, and I don't deny it. I think it's perfectly plausible that the album is essentially 24 hours in the life of one character or composite characters. But by the time Darkness on the Edge of Town, like the guy's pretty much solo. he's on his own.
Yeah.
And so for the river, and after the big 78 tour, Bruce released, he turned in a single album, which is to be titled The Ties That Bind, which is the first song on the album that would be released.
Yeah, I love that song.
Retractable. And they've released that album, the cut of that album, tapes of the acetate on the River box set that came out a couple of years ago. And it's got a couple, different takes, different versions, a couple completely different songs. But it's a single album. And Bruce withdrew it at the last minute, being an obsessive depressive. Said, no, it's not big enough. This isn't the story I want to tell. So Bruce has this, or at least his mythology is that's not the story I want to tell. So the band went back in the studio and just kept recording, and there's just loads of outtakes, just brilliant outtakes from the river sessions. Most of them have been released, or a lot of them. But said, it's got to be a double album. I've got to have just silly, throwaway rockers like I'm a Rocker or Crush on You, which I love. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, me too.
A lot
I
of
love that
people
one.
really hate. They think it's just stupid. But, just the, Ramrod and Look But You Better Not Touch. These are just great rock and roll songs with great sound and a great band playing. Bruce apparently decided he wanted a little bit more community. Darkness on the Edge of Town, it was getting too dark. It was getting too just one guy and his struggles.
Yeah, Darkness on the Edge of Town just enveloped the whole town.
Yeah, and then the river, okay, we'll open it up a little more, and then the big tour, overseas as well, Europe and the UK. So something happened to him because he comes home and starts writing Nebraska.
There's a lot of joy in the river, and you're touring that for 2 years. You're just on this high that you don't come down from because you're just touring it constantly.
Right,
and
but
you come down from that, you're by yourself and you're renting a house in New Jersey.
Right, but think about the songs on the river. He used to play like 3 of them in a row, and it was called the Heart of Darkness sequence.
Yeah.
Point Blank, which actually dates back to Darkness on the Edge of Town.
Yeah, the song The River, of course, that's kind of dark.
Right, but that's almost romantic. That's almost melancholy compared to Point Blank.
Yeah.
Wreck on the Highway.
Yeah. Sure. There were hints. There was forebodings of Nebraska in there.
Oh yeah, very much so. And even some of the outtakes. But yeah, the guy he was not happy. Well, he was Bruce ever a happy camper? Who knows? People like when he got released the Human Touch and Lucky Town simultaneously in '92. He just married Patty. And had his first kid, and used studio hack musicians for Human Touch, and like nobody wanted. And granted, they're a really bad sounding album, especially Human Touch. But,
and we know from reading his autobiography that he was struggling with depression throughout his whole life.
Right, but he was trying to be happy and present. I'm in love. I found love.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
Now there's some great songs, some good songs, but even a couple great ones on those 2 albums. Mm-hmm. But overall, they're kind of, I don't know, so what? Bad sound, bad production, bad mixing, kind of marred them. He's never remastered either of them. He's released a bunch of outtakes from those sessions, which oftentimes are better than some of the best songs on those 2 albums.
Yeah.
The joke in the Bruce community kind of was like, oh, nobody likes Happy Bruce. We like Bruce to be miserable. This is my story, and it's a very
Ghost
great
of Tom
thing.
Joad was kind of reconnecting with the Nebraska vibe a little bit?
Maybe. I think it's a very different thing. It's certainly set in the West rather than the East.
Yeah.
There's, some other musicians. It's very slight. I remember a review of it at the time in, 95 when it was released.
Yeah.
Said, this album makes Nebraska sound like a party album.
Yeah.
But there actually is some brushed drums and, Danny Federici doing some synth lines and Gary Talent, some very, very simple, bass, things. So it's musically, it's got more, it's not nearly the record. Now, its concerns and its language and its themes are similar, yet a continent, not a world, but a continent apart from Nebraska. Mm-hmm. And it goes to Tom Joad. It sounds like, thematically, like it could have been recorded yesterday. Mm-hmm. Immigration is a big theme, and the plight of immigrants, people in the southwest of the United States, south of the border as well, Mexico, and how they try to make a living. Or just survive by crossing the border into the United States. It's a very, very heavy album. Bruce's voice is, some call it the twang. And he's always had a bit of a twang in his voice, but it's very accentuated on the Ghost of Tom Joad album. It's almost indecipherable sometimes. But so what? When was Bob Dylan not indecipherable, or Mick Jagger for that matter, or Muddy Waters, or Elmore James? Or,
I always try to imagine how weird it would have been in real time when you heard John Wesley Harding. That must have sounded so weird at the time.
I think we've talked about this. I'm not that familiar with that album, but I know the.
But it's just the Lay Lady Lay, right?
Well, that's from Nashville Skyline.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a similar era. That's his non-smoking voice.
Yeah, that's one of the few Bob songs I actively dislike.
Okay. No.
But
But you get my point. It's how does it feel to be on your own? That Bob Dylan contrasted with Lay Lady Lay. It's a big change. The twang you're talking about with Springsteen just reminded me of the change that Dylan's voice went through in a very short amount of time.
Right. And that's just it's not just genius. You don't have to be Pavarotti or even Bono. You have to use the tools that you have. And Dylan's always done that. His voice, has changed through the decades, many decades, 6 of them, or more. I didn't even know Lay Lady Lay was Dylan. Probably the first 50 times I heard it.
Yeah, why would you? It doesn't sound like Dylan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I just thought,
shapeshifter.
Yeah.
But that's very interesting. It's like someone who's just following their own muse and they're not concerned with what people are going to think.
Yeah, Bruce has used the twang to, greater or lesser degrees. He's always had a bit of a twang in his voice. And apparently the part of New Jersey, Freehold, that he's from, was known as Little Texas.
Oh, interesting.
Because a whole lot of Texans came up after the war, sort of like the Great Migration from the Deep South to Chicago for a lot of
interesting. So he would have been
black people.
A certain amount of country western influence in Freehold.
Yeah, apparently there. And language, in accent. So, but you can read see interviews of him, talking whatever, and it's he sounds like basically just a guy from New Jersey. But it's what is his voice, his natural speaking voice right now? He's probably giving an interview somewhere right now as we speak. Yeah. Well, what's Bob Dylan's natural voice and his natural speaking voice? Indeterminate. It's indeterminate locale from 1962. where's this guy from? Bob made up all kinds of stories from where he was from who he was. He was a hobo, and he landed in New York, and it's all kinds of stories.
See, I don't think Bruce Springsteen, it's easier to say with Bruce Springsteen because he's actually giving interviews recently. You don't think he sounds like he's from New Jersey?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't, I've known some people from New Jersey, but, yeah. I'm talking about his various singing voices, which he can turn on and off. Like, sure. For some reissue albums, like, The Promise on the Dark Side and the Edge of Town box set, he overdubbed a lot of vocals. On the River box set, he overdubbed a couple vocals. Kind of like, as I said earlier, like Jagger, he still is somehow, his voice he's able to channel, this is supposed to sound like 1974. Oh, this is supposed to sound like 1978. He's able to do that. He's versatile enough. Where I'm sure, say, Dylan and probably Paul McCartney and maybe some other people probably couldn't overdub vocals to vintage, songs. Like,
that's right. Yeah,
and make it sound.
It's interesting, like how the voice goes. Like McCartney can still do like the high pitched screams, but a lot of his higher mid range is gone. Whereas, interestingly, it seems like Jagger and Springsteen can still do a falsetto.
They're both athletic dudes. I don't know, so much about Paul. I'm sure he's got his regimens. He looks, healthy and fine.
Oh, Paul does. He can still do. He does yoga. Like he does yoga headstands regularly.
So, Bruce has had problems with his fans, with some of his. I'm sure, just like Dylan. With his various voices through the years, but he can still settle on, I think it's exemplified in the new recording of the new box set that we're talking about, the Nebraska album. There's very little of the overt twang, almost indecipherable twang, even though his voice is much stronger, older, but more powerful. And maybe powerful isn't a good thing because
he almost like
the original album they're almost whispered unless he's actually shrieking.
I think it was a smart move because a lot of that twang, based on my own observation and what you're telling me, was developed post Nebraska, and he wisely dialed that down to be more in the general ballpark of Nebraska kind of vibe.
Yeah, very much so. But all credit to him that he's able to do that, and that he's willing to do it. Like, would Bob, Dylan, be willing to overdub? Now, he's never done it, I don't think, and I don't think he could or he would overdub vocals in 2025 on a song from. Name a year. 1982.
Yeah. No, it wouldn't work. Unless you overtly said, "Okay, I'm redoing this." It would sound weird.
Right.
But anyway, hey man, mission accomplished. We had a good talk about Nebraska.
All right. Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's it.
That's it. That's all there is. There ain't no more. All right, man. Very good. I want to say that I really like your takes and attention to the Nebraska project. I didn't want to do it originally. I was going to call you just before you called me, but I was in the bathroom, and I was going to say, I don't know if I want to do this, man. I've only listened once, and I thought that was a project. We'll just do like music. Listen to it once.
Yeah, it moved me. I'm glad we did it. There's something about it that really moved me a lot. So I'm happy we discussed it.
I really liked your commentary. It's
likewise.
Supposedly the the Bruce expert and blah blah blah, but emotionally and psychologically, your commentary.
Yeah, it was a good balance because you've read the books, and I'm just kind of reacting to it like, directly, how the lyrics are impacting me and stuff. So
We haven't really talked about Bruce that much. I mean, not just
No.
the podcast. I mean, just like, oh yeah, we like Bruce. Next, and it's like, oh.
Yeah, it's about time we gave up Bruce a proper discussion. So this was a great vehicle for that, for sure.
Yeah. Excellent, man.